Good evening, everybody. I hope you guys have had a wonderful day. So tonight we're talking about a very important topic. Tonight we're talking about family foundations. So before we get into the questions that we have, I just want to kind of give a little backstory. So last night I had heard this message, and it was in reference to Jacob. It was in reference to Jacob and Esau. Um, and the message that I heard um, was in reference to how Jacob had to change. And before I even get there, let me introduce myself. My name is Keisha. I'm with the Sister Collaboration. I'm the visionary and the host. Tonight we have Dr. Robin Mobley Boston, just as well as Dr. Kimberly McKenzie. And we're going to be talking about the youth and transitions and family foundations. So before I get started though, I feel led to go over this. So I want to go over something that the Lord revealed to me last night. And so when I was thinking about the story when it comes to Jacob and Esau, in the Bible it always says that Rachel she favored Jacob, and it said that Isaac he favored Esau, right? And so we know that Jacob he manipulated his father, and his mother helped him so he could get the blessing that Esau was supposed to get. But one of the things that really stuck out to me was that the reason why he manipulated the blessing was because I feel like from what I could see in the message that there was some rockiness when it came to the family foundation, right? Because it showed that one parent favored this child, and it showed that another parent favored another child, right? And so
Mhm.
when we began to look at that, it really caused some rockiness between the brothers because they were twins. And typically when we hear about twins are usually close. They usually can sense, one another when things are going on. But when you really look at it in the Bible, you don't really see where Jacob and Esau were close. They were not even described the same, right? Like they had different type of interests. They even looked different. Like it seemed like it was nothing similar about them. It seems like there was no type of connection. And so when you begin to look at that family foundation, it seems like it was kind of it really wasn't on the same page. And I believe that because of that, that's what really caused some division to be amongst siblings, right? And in later time, they made up for it. But you think about all of that time that they lost, right? When they were separated, and
Mhm.
so one of the things that I was thinking about in reference to that is that even in today's time, like you have certain you have parents that might favor certain kids, and a lot of times we may think that our kids might not pick up on it, or they might not know, right? And really they do. And I believe that can cause some triggers and some hidden trauma, that can cause some hidden disappointment, some hidden rejection. And I believe that's why Jacob decided to manipulate or go along with what his mother said in reference to the blessing, because there was some hidden rejection that was there, because his father did not think the same of him. And so to me, that's very important for what we're going to discuss tonight, because whenever it comes to the family model, and the way that the Lord has created the family model, just like when he looks at us as his children, he looks at us all the same, right? He loves us all the same, right? And so I believe that when it comes to the family foundations, we as parents, we have to be very specific with the type of foundation that we set for our children. And there also has to be times where we have to have those healing conversations with our children. There might have been things that we did that were not right, and the very deliverance that your child needs could be in your voice, it could be in your apology, it could be in your conversation,
Yes.
it could be in what you need to say. And as parents, we have got to get away from that standard of, kind of like what I say goes and all those different things. And we really got to start having conversations with our children, especially when they get older, because as they get older, they're going to begin to make their own decisions. And we might not always agree with their decisions, but as their parents, we should always ask the Lord, well, how do I steward this blessing? As in, how do I steward this child? Because every child is different, just like every gift is different. So how, and when I'm talking about gifts, I'm talking about just like the gifts when it talks about in the Bible, you have, the gift of tongues, you have the gift of faith. Like every gift is different, right? So it's different ways that you have to steward those gifts. So just like with your children, there are different gifts that the Lord has blessed you with. So there are different ways that you have to steward them. And in these conversations, and in this foundation, we are bringing it in, from a spiritual level, but we're also bringing it in from a level of, I wouldn't necessarily say science, but I guess you could say more like psychology. But we're bringing it in from that level too, on how to connect those things and bridge that gap.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna be quiet in just a little bit, but how to how to bridge that gap, because even when you look at Moses and Joshua, right?
Mhm.
That wasn't his son, right? But the Lord called him to, guide him as a spiritual father. And although Moses was not able to go into the promised land, but put in a lot of the work, he did not hinder Joshua from leading the people into the promised land. And so I say that all to say to his parents, there are times where we're going to plow the ground for the generations to come, and we don't need to hinder them from what the Lord has called them to do, because the blessing that they might reap might be different from ours. But we should see it as an honor and as a privilege that the Lord has given us the opportunity to steward those children and to bring them into the calling that the Lord has on their life. So before we get into our questions, I do want Dr. Robin, you can go first, and then Dr. Kimberly, just give a little background about what it is that you guys do.
Okay. Good evening. I am Dr. Robin Mobley Boston. I I am work at Soul Care Christian Counseling in Charlotte, North Carolina, um, and also the pastor of New Line of Judah Ministry in Kannapolis, North Carolina. Um, I guess I to sum up for myself as to what if I would say what is it overall that I do, I would say that it would be that connecting, just like what you were saying a few minutes ago, it hit something with me whenever you were saying you were thinking that we were going to go more into like a clinical or a counseling type part of it. I look at the fact of we so often leave out the mental part of our spiritual growth. And then we find out, a lot of times, why can't I connect to this and why can't I connect to that? And a lot of times it's because in our modern day churches, we're not dealing or teaching us how to deal with these emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and has us looking at God when we come into it as it's going to be a magic wand, then poop, and it's gone. But at the end of the day, a lot of times what's left behind is a residue from the hurt and the disappointments that we have not been taught how to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's where I am now in allowing God to cultivate me in dealing with that part of our spiritual growth.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry, but before we get to Dr. Kimberly, we also have Jacob here with us. Jacob is a young adult who's still in high school. He's actually my son, but the Lord told me probably about a few weeks ago to bring him on to the podcast. And I was like, really, God? He was like, yeah, really. And I encouraged him and I told him, there's a voice that you have that the
Mhm.
generation that the Lord has called you to, that they need to hear this. And so, this is training ground too. The word of God tells us train up a child in the way they should go and they won't depart from it. So I'm within the last couple of years, the Lord has made it my business to start to train my children in ministry, even at a young age, even in reference to, healing and deliverance at a young age. We're going through this together. So, Jacob, do you have anything you'd like to say before Dr. Kimberly introduce herself?
No.
No? Okay. All right. You go ahead, Dr. Kim. No, we can't hear you. And so, no, you might want to try going out and coming back in. So, Dr. Kimberly, I'm just going to give you a brief overview. So, Dr. Kimberly, she is what we call your mind doctor. She's a big advocate for mental health, especially with bridging the gap with mental health when it comes to ministry, when it comes to the church. She also works very closely with youth, particularly high school students. So she has a very strong background. Um, she's also working towards becoming a licensed counselor. So she has a very strong background when it comes to working with the youth and women and just individuals in general when it comes to mental health. So, Dr. Kimberly, maybe you could try going out and coming back in and seeing if that'll work. So, the first thing that I really want to talk about is healing generations. So, one of the things, and this is more from a spiritual aspect, but from a spiritual aspect, when the Lord has called us to be the curse breaker, I don't think that a lot of times we realize the assignment or the weight that comes from that because we're healing generations through those curses that we are breaking. And the thing is that when it comes to the different curses that are in your generation or that are in your bloodline, those things that the Lord is calling are asking, I didn't even really say asking her, are telling you to break in your generation. It is very, very important to leave no residue. When I say no residue, what I mean in reference to that, it's important to let your children know the things that were broken or the things you dealt with in your generation, right? And so a lot of times these things try to be hidden, and what happens is when we hide those things, it causes there to be residue that is left. Because whenever you have a generational curse that's within a bloodline, whatever that spirit is, whatever that principality is, it feels like it owns the bloodline. That's what it feels like. It owns the bloodline, that it owns that territory. And so the thing is that sometimes we can see what different things will try to skip generations. And so let me get to my second point that the Lord showed me. So, with Jacob, right? Jacob tried to manipulate, or he did manipulate the blessing, right? Which the Lord had already called him anyway. But one of the things that the Lord showed me was Abraham. Abraham was Jacob's great no grandfather. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, his grandfather. Okay, so one of the things the Lord showed me, Abraham tried something very similar when he decided to have Ishmael, right? So we might have not saw it with Isaac, but here we are, we're seeing it with Jacob. Okay, and so the thing is that the Lord was showing me is that when we leave that residue there and we don't really catch that, you might not see it in your generation, but when you're going to war for the generations that's coming after you. You might not experience it, but your mother might experience it, but now you see it in your children, right? Or either in your grandchildren. So we can't leave that residue that's there, right?
Mhm.
Just like if you look at David and then you look at King Solomon, it didn't skip, but it went from father to son, right? He fell to Bathsheba, King Solomon. He had a lot of wives, right? So look, I got two other people on here with me, so I got into my teacher moment. So, Dr. Robin, when you hear the phrase a healing generation, what comes to mind for you personally?
Well, when I was looking at that question, one of the first scriptures that came to my mind was like Isaiah 58 and 12. And in Isaiah 58 and 12, it says, "And they that shall be of these shall build the old waste places. They shall raise up the foundations of many generations. So when I was thinking about this question, to me, it was thinking about, just like how you were saying, we building these generations mean that we have to go back to the foundations or something, or either, at a better word, is go to the root of a certain thing, and deal with that root. Because if we don't, just as you were given the example of the biblical stories, although it's gonna repeat itself. It keeps going in a cycle. But to rebuild and to heal, it has to be that one that wants to go to the root of that cause. Why do we do this? Why is this a repeated thing
Mm-hmm.
in our bloodline? Why do we repeatedly see this in our family? For me, that's what it's like. For the heal that generation, you have to be that somebody that's willing to go back and put a stop to that particular thing.
Mm-hmm.
And and when it comes to our children, this, like, I like how you were saying earlier, when it comes to our children, we have to be ready to be transparent with the things that even, like you said, that we have done, and where we were wrong. It not just say, don't do that, don't do that, because I did it. No, we don't need that. We need to give them an explanation. We need to tell them, well, I made this particular choice, but it was a big price for this choice. And
Mm-hmm.
this is why I say what I say to you, or this is why I'm trying to encourage you to go another way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what came to me when you asked the question about the healing of the generations, and
Mm-hmm.
what I feel is missing is being truthful about what we're going through, and allowing our kids, and allowing even our grown adult kids an explanation, or to sit down and talk and listen to them. Because we can't look at them and be like, when they're dealing with something in their adulthood that they feel like came from something that happened in their childhood, and you brush it off. But no, we have to listen to them, and then, take ownership to what they say affected them,
Mm-hmm. 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 And I
instead
think
of.
one of the things too is that, once I started going through my healing process, is that healing hurts, right? Because it's some deep rooted stuff that, you might not want to know about yourself, and you didn't want to know about, your
Mhm.
family or family lineage. And it's some things that can hurt. Before we get to you, Dr. Kim, I do want to ask Jacob, um, what are some things that you feel like that your current generation deals with that we might not fully understand?
Um,
Mm.
I say expression feelings
Mm-hmm.
because some hold them back so much and so long that based on who around them or the childhood they grow up in, they get to a point that hiding feelings is normal for them and they don't like to express them as much.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that because I grew up in the I grew up in a time frame where I think they even made a song about it. Men weren't supposed to cry. Y'all probably know this song.
Yeah.
Y'all probably know this song. And so we have a generation now where they kind of wearing their feelings on their sleeve. They're not really hiding it. Dr. Kim, would you like to chime in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with your son. Many of the children, I'll say students because I'm an educator. I've been in education for the past 30 years. 20 of those years been in special education for specific learning disability and emotional behavior disorders. So it's funny because I actually had a conversation with my students today. Um, I dealing with one of the students that was dealing with anxiety around graduating, did everything she thought she was supposed to do. We got her to the finish line to find out like there's one more other thing. And so we just started talking about that. And so one of the students was like, hey, is the other student okay? I was like, why you ask? Well, she looks like she's not okay. And I was so excited when he said, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're supposed to check on one another. And so, that just opened up a door in the classroom. Bump your lessons. Let's go down this lane.
Right.
And so we started talking about it, and he was like, maybe you should step out in the hallway because that's where she is. So I go out there. She had already been in my classroom. And what was funny was she asked another student, hey, can you step outside? I need to talk to her. So we had already talked. So I kind of knew what was going on. So when I went out there, she was just like, I don't want to come in because I'm ashamed. I don't want people to see me down. I don't want people to see me cry. I don't want people to know that something is going on. She was like, I'm okay if you know, but I don't want anybody else to know. And I said, well, you know what? These are your peers and they're rooting for you. And matter of fact, they sent me out here to check on you. So it's okay. So I said, just get yourself together, go to the bathroom and come in when you're ready. And so that's what she did. And as soon as she came in, the same student, you good? And she was like, yeah, I'm good, thanks. But I will go back to say what Jacob said. They do not like to express themselves other than when it's in a negative light, like when they're mad, when they're upset, when they're emotional, towards something that has angered them, not something that has hurt them or disappointed them. And like you were saying, especially our young men, they will hold things. They will hold things. They will hold things. They will go into their cave. They will get silent. And in some cases, you can never get it out of them. It's just going to be what it's going to be. And if it comes out one day, it comes out. So I would agree with your son that it's the not wanting to, being embarrassed or ashamed of expressing themselves and letting their peers know that there is something wrong or they're facing something or they have a challenge or issue going on.
And so I'm gonna kind of jump around a little bit. So with that being said, why do you think so many children struggle silently instead of asking for help and support? Because I know the school, like, they have the school counselors and, the support systems, are set up, in the school. I know it's a lot different when it comes, to ministry, but I know like on a school basis, and even on the ministry basis, you want to elaborate on that. But why do you think sometimes maybe some children do struggle silently instead of reaching out?
Students do not like to be embarrassed on any shape, form, or level. Children across the board do not like to be embarrassed. And they do not like to ask the questions because if I ask the question, this might be a dumb question, and then people might think that I'm dumb. So at the base of it, if a student is struggling with their academics, they don't want anyone to know that they're struggling with their
Mhm.
academics. So they will hold that. And I have been in meeting after meeting after meeting where we say, hey, let someone know if you need help. You need to be an advocate for yourself. But our students really, really, really deal heavily in pride and shame and embarrassment and even guilt, like feeling bad because they're not catching on to the subject or the
Mhm.
content. And so they're embarrassed. And so they rather just stay silent and try to figure it out on their own, chat
Mhm.
GPT, or maybe go home and tell a
Yeah.
parent. And now you got the parents doing the homework instead of the child. But
Right.
many of them will not say. And I think
Mhm.
it goes back. I thought you were about to go down this road when you were talking about men crying. But I grew up in that era, and I think you're right behind me, where a child stay in a child place. You didn't have any expression. You didn't get to say what you thought about something.
Mhm.
This is what you're doing. Period. It's no conversation. We don't get to talk
Right.
about this. We don't get to
Right.
debate. What did I say?
Right. You didn't get. We didn't
That's
get
kind
no.
of
Right.
the era that we
Right.
grew up in, especially in our African American community. And I
Right.
think
You
that
didn't.
has come down from generation to generation, even
Uh-huh.
though our students and children now have more freedom and more liberty at the
Right.
tongue than we had. but it's still that
Right.
notion there, like, you
Yeah.
don't speak until you're
Yeah.
spoken to. You know, all of the things that we got coming
Right.
down
Right.
the pipe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not to the point where, like we might ask our children, like, is there a reason why, you don't want to do it? We're kind of at least ask, the why to try to get an understanding behind it. But yeah, in some of those eras that we grew up in, you didn't even get that. Whatever they said is what they said, and that was it. You didn't get any type of you didn't get any type of voice. And even if you ask why, it's like you asked me why, you didn't get any of that. So and I think that too. I think
That why, that's considered a talk back.
right.
That's a backhand.
Girl, that was why you was asking to be murdered. Jesus.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that as you begin to parent yourself, you have to really step out of that because
Yes.
you were used to that. So now you're having to shift that and be like, okay, I gotta do this differently. And sometimes it can take some time because a lot of times we were conditioned. You know what I'm saying? Like we were conditioned as in this is how things are supposed to go. So I'm gonna ask Jacob though. So as far as when it comes to some of the challenges with your generation, why do you think that sometimes children of your generation are quiet, or they don't talk much to, their parents?
I say it's like how little kids are to older siblings. They always watch because they always see what you're doing, even when you don't think they seeing you. And I say because since they watch you and see how you react with different things, something they will ask and something they will not ask because they already know what type of reaction you will have.
Mm,
And because of your reaction, they don't want to ask because they don't feel like getting that
yeah,
reaction back from you.
yeah. That's good because I said something to him earlier. I was like, "Why?" I was like, "Why you didn't tell me?" I was like, "I probably would have been fussing, but I still would have helped you." I I said I still would have helped you. He probably like, I don't want to hear you fussing though. That's why I ain't say nothing. That's why I didn't say anything. And so I could see that because just like even for us as adults, if we're working a job and we kind of know if we don't drop the ball on something or we need help, so we probably like, man, I don't go to my boss. I don't want to go to my boss with this because you kind of already know where the conversation might be headed, or we kind of already replayed it in our mind, right? We already kind of put in this expectation of where this conversation is going to go. And so one of the things that I can say that I teach them, like even if you don't feel like you're going to get the answer that you want to hear, that you should hear, I was like, still reach out anyway. Like you might be surprised by the answer that you get. And set that expectation there. But no, that's really good because sometimes we do, we sometimes we do, and that's something that we have to get better at as parents. Sometimes we do tell our children, hey, reach out, you need this, you need that. And then when they do, we respond in a way to where we might show our emotions, right? We might show our emotions a bit. But I can say is that I wouldn't want that to stop you from still reaching out. And any other children out there listen, like, don't let that stop you from still reaching out or reach out to a trusted source. Sometimes it might not always be your parent, but there might be other places that the Lord has placed in your life too that can help you along with your journey. Um, so one of the other things that I do want to talk about is Pastor Robin. How do you think that unresolved trauma impacts behavior, relationships, parenting, and communication with families?
Hmm. I think with the trauma and different things, it can lead a lot of time to how we become to be defensive,
Mm,
so defensive about a whole lot of things, or and it causes us to be in that state where you find those people that are emotionally distant,
Hmm.
mm,
or you find those that have problems with anger or being withdrawn, um, and always fearful or something of certain things. Sometimes, a lot of time, that fear can be the fact of thinking somebody's always after them, or someone's always talking about them, or they're always being that one that's pushed to the side. And a lot of times when you start talking to people and dealing with people, you'll find that the root of that is some type of trauma or
Mhm.
rejection that they have, they have experienced. And then that affects our behavior, and that affects how we build relationships, and it even affects us in parenting. And until we go to that point of dealing with that root thing, and I guess you could say taking a look in the mirror and dealing with ourselves first. And we have and it ha- you have to be willing to go back to what we were talking about on the first one, being that one that wants to heal that foundation. So you have to go back to be willing to go back to that foundation and deal with that thing and face with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're gonna find, even when you that one that want to deal with it, you end up being the black sheep
Mhm.
Yeah.
and have
Yeah.
to do
That's good.
more rejection.
That's good. And that's good too. And that's the thing when you're dealing with that unresolved trauma, even when you feel like you got to a point when you resolved it, like it's
Mhm,
still a continual thing where you're having to disempower those lies, right? Because
mhm,
the enemy's still going to try to keep speaking. I was telling somebody the other day, I was like, sometimes when people are dealing with unresolved trauma, even though you could be having just a typical normal conversation with them trying to help them, they're not really hearing what you're saying because that voice and that trauma, I mean, because the pain and the trauma, it has a voice too. And
mhm,
so they have to get in the mindset of disempowering those lies. And, the word of God tells us to take every thought captive. And if we're not taking those thoughts captive, those lies that the enemy is speaking, which means it's creating an agreement, which in the long run can create a stronghold, right? And if we're not disempowering those things, if we're not doing the work, like that's what I keep hearing, like you gotta do the work. You gotta do the work when you're dealing with unresolved trauma. And a lot of times I think for some people it's easier for them to stay there, right? It's easier for them to believe the lie than to work against the lie and speak against it, because it is work. You might get up some days and you might constantly be saying, Satan, I rebuke you, I rebuke that, I rebuke you know what I'm saying? I rebuke that, I take that thought captive, putting on worship music, going into prayer, going and speaking tongues. That's something that you do. But there is work when it comes to unresolved trauma. And even when you feel like you resolved it, don't think don't think even once you get delivered and you get up from the floor or whatever the case may be, that it stops there. Like the enemy is still coming back. He'll still try to make you rehearse it and replay those conversations and those words in your mind. And it truly is a everyday battle. And one of the things that when talking about that family foundation, whenever you're training or whenever you're teaching yourself to disempower those lies, you got to teach your children how to disempower those lies. The enemy does not wait and hits the time clock and say, hey, oh, they're 18. Now let me go in. No, no, he's
mhm,
coming in from the womb. And you
mhm.
you got to teach them how to war with their hands at a young age. If these kids can be on these Xboxes and PlayStations and using them hands for that, you got to teach them how to war with their hands in this Bible too. You got to get that word in front of them. You got to get that meat in front of them, so that way they have a foundation on how to fight the enemy. Because could you imagine if somebody's hearing the same thing over and over and over again from age 5 all the way up to 25, and now realizing at the age of 25 that this is a lie? It's if we look at it that way, and if we're not setting that foundation and training right, we're not putting them in a good position spiritually. Do you get what I'm saying? Like we would not be putting them in a good position spiritually. And this is the time to really break out with that. I think Dr. Kim, I think you had something you wanted to say.
No, I was just pretty much agreeing with what Dr. Pastor Robin, Dr. Robin had already spoken. When you don't deal with the trauma as a parent, then you get into your parenting style may become like
Mhm.
more authoritative. You deal with dysregulation and attachment, insecure attachment, and that can be projected on to the child. And so now, where you had the trauma, and now you're passing that trauma on to your child emotionally for them to end up being an adult dealing with the same type of issues. So yeah, you pretty much hit it on the nail. So that's it. I just wanted to say, like, it can impact your parenting style. um, and I know in the African American community, the major parenting style is authoritative.
Authoritative. Yeah,
Yes,
authoritative. Yeah.
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 I know I came out in the era when Dr. Spark had started to come out, and time out, Jody. Yeah, and you know the joke. Time out was what my parents took to beat my behind, so but one of the things when you're dealing with unresolved trauma, whether it's a youth or whether it's an adult, whether it's a parent, emotional walls get built up. And so then
Mm,
they get um, thicker and thicker and thicker if you don't get to the root of it, if you don't peel it back, if you don't address it. And before you know it, you're inside and someone else is operating you. You have a rejection personality, walk in offense. It opens you up for dissociation. It just opens you up for so many things, and then just not having great communication skills. So that's it. I just wanted
yeah.
to
Yeah.
chime in, but what you all said was already,
No, no, that's good. That's good. Because
And
one of my things was disassociation. Like I could dissociate real quick, like
and
real quick.
and it also triggers dysfunctional family routines and patterns,
yes.
Mhm,
from
mhm.
the adult to the child, back from the child back to the adults.
Yeah, yeah. And so one of the major things is um, when you're trying to recreate or reestablish that family foundation, ask the Lord, where do you need to start? Ask him what lies have, you believed or have been inputted in that foundation, or ask him what generational curses are there. Because here's the thing, I know a lot of times we say, well, the people before us, they didn't tell me that, but look, the Holy Spirit is the Spirit of truth. He know all. If you
Hmm.
seek the Lord, wholeheartedly and ask him, look, what is this I'm dealing with in this bloodline? He's going to speak to you. He's going to speak to you and let you know, and then also give you a solution to what it is that you need to do. And I even hear him saying, some of these things come out through fasting and prayer, and a lot of times we put that fasting tool down, and the Lord is like, pick it up. You got to pick that fasting tool up. You got to deny that flesh,
Hmm.
even to the point where, fast until you see breakthrough. Don't fast for like a day or two and they be like, oh, didn't that happen? No, like keep at it. That's why I say it's work, and
Yeah,
Hmm.
you
it's
have to be
not a work.
intentional.
Yeah, and it's not a work that your flesh enjoys, right? It's not
Mhm.
a work that the flesh enjoys. So it is going to feel uncomfortable. I mean, that's just
Mhm.
what it is. It's going to feel uncomfortable, but you have to look at the end result. That's just like when people condition themselves for boxing, or they condition themselves for football. And I'm sure my son could tell you because he plays football. When it's 100-degree weather out in Georgia in July and they're practicing, it's not fun. You know what I'm saying? But they're conditioning themselves for that. And so we have to look at it on a spiritual aspect, that I'm going to condition, as Paul says, I can't remember what scripture it is, but he said how he buffeted his body, he buffeted his flesh for the work of Christ.
Nice.
And so that's where we have to be at. And it's not always easy, but it's so, like the reward to it is so great, to see not only yourself, but to see generations to come, and to see your children walk in freedom, right? Like,
Yes.
because that's the goal, is to walk in freedom, is to walk in the abundant life that that Christ has given us. And so I want to ask both of you ladies, even with chiming in on that, what do you guys think as well could be a good foundation that families could reestablish or recreate? Like, what are some tools or resources that they can use to reestablish the foundations for their relationship with their children? And when I say their children, not it doesn't matter the age of your child. Like, if your children are still here and you're still alive, it's never too late to reestablish that foundation. So, what's some insight that you can give, Dr. Kim, in reference to that?
I will always say, no matter what, for any type of relationship, nothing beats time. Spending time together, having quality time together. Whether it's weekly, if you're a unit and you all are in the same house and your children are growing up, and they learn rules and roles through how the family interacts with each other. If you're dealing with like adult children and everybody is off doing their own thing, designating maybe once a month, once every other month, that no matter what, or a week, I don't know how your family dynamics are, but establishing some time, this is the time where the family gets together. And when we come together, no technology, put your stuff off to the side, and we're going to spend some time,
Mhm.
whether you go bowling, whether you just sit and watch a movie, order pizza, whether you have a game night, whether you go watch a movie and come back and have a dialogue about it. But I definitely think building that foundation starts with spending quality time with one another and getting to know one another more intimately than passing and going, because we know that can happen very easily in the family, even with young children, dropping off at soccer, picking up from dance practice,
Ooh,
going to
tell
choir
me.
rehearsal, have to jump on a live. So it's so many different parts that we have to stop and take time, be intentional about being getting to know one another through intimacy and spending time
Yeah,
with one another.
yeah,
And when you do that, it's just like spending time
Mhm.
with God, where as in if something happens, you know God, and so you'll be like, that ain't. My father didn't do that. This the enemy, or he's pruning me. I gotta
Mhm.
turn that plate down. So then, if Jacob come in and he's acting a certain kind of way, you'll know as a parent.
yeah.
We don't act like that. Jake, you good? What's up? What's going on? You want to talk about it? Okay, well, I'm gonna give you some time by yourself, but we're gonna set aside an hour, and in another hour we're gonna come and you're gonna tell me something. Like if it ain't but
Yes.
one word, but like leave me alone. But and even doing something like that establishes the fact that I care. I care about
Yeah.
you, even though you may not want to share or may not want me to be involved. I care. So yeah.
You know why I'm laughing? Hold on, Dr. Rob, because it be times where he about to say nothing, and I'm like, the Lord gonna tell me. I'll be back. I'm gonna
See,
go
see,
to
you're gonna have your son scared of God. He ain't going like the Holy Ghost. He gonna be
I remember this video I watched on TikTok or somewhere where the boy said his parent was like prophetic or something, and she called him. She was like, "What you doing in the bathroom?" He was like, "Huh? What you doing, super class?"
wait a minute. All jokes aside, that happened to me for real, and I got the beating of my life and had to run away from home because I was playing Uno. But we ain't I had company in the house, and the rule was no company in the house. And my mother said she was driving, and the Holy Ghost said, turn around, go back home." And I tried to sneak the company out the house when she went to the bathroom and she heard the door. Next thing I know, there was that belt buckle. Boom, tore my hands up. But anyway, that ain't good. That teaches us to fear. You fear God. And one more thing, like how I'm sitting right now, when you walked in our house, before you can go to the bedroom, there was an opening right here, and my mother's picture was there. I'm serious, y'all. If you went this way, her eyes went that way. If you you walked that way, I don't care which way you were, her eyes was like. But be careful, because that might not be healthy for Jacob and your children. I just want to tell you as a grown adult.
Oh God, it's so funny you
I
said
need
that
healing.
'cause my baby son he did something earlier, and somebody told me they ain't tell me who did, and I said so and so did it. He looked at me, he said, "How you know? How you know I did that?"
The Holy Ghost is real, and the Holy Ghost is powerful.
Mm.
So, oh my gosh, I feel like I got to turn around my questions. That's so funny though, because it's so
Ooh,
We was
Jesus.
talking about foundation, how you build the foundation with your children.
that you might not want to try try that one. So, so Dr. Robin, what is a good way you think to build a healthy foundation with your kids?
I for me with dealing with that, it goes back for me to the old African folklore and where it takes as a village.
Mm, yeah,
And
it does. Hmm.
and saying that, and even with what Dr. Kimberly was saying, you know, let letting them know how special they are, letting them know that somebody cares, not just your parents care, but every mom on the block cares.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Because it's just like when we talk about when we were coming up, that's the way we came up in the neighborhood. You had respect for every mother, and the big mamas in the neighborhood, girl, big mama didn't have to do nothing but look at you. And it
yep,
didn't have to be yours. It could be anybody's big mama. And then as children, if a person disrespected somebody's mama, we would go to them, man, you can't do that. That's so and
right.
so mama. That's Miss So and so. You can't be doing that. We would shut that down as the kids in the neighborhood and let them, you're not gonna do that. You're not gonna talk to her like that. So
Mhm.
in building that foundation back up and bringing that structure back up, it's like, some things, yeah, we need to let go of, but then some things we need to grab back because those things were very much needed. It held an accountability to everybody for the family, for the neighborhoods. And when we took those things out, well, we're living in the results.
Mhm. Yeah,
We're
we
living
really
in the results, and now we have the generational cracked foundations. We
are.
have those things as to where we don't confide in each other. Me and my cousins often talk about how with my grandmother, I guess you would call it a boarding house for nowadays, but to us it was just home. But it was different ones that lived in the home at times. So it was one particular one. He was drunk all the time, but at the end of the day, we as kids learned to respect even what he said. And then with my grandmother, when you had those certain ones that nowadays we would look at them as being an outcast in the family. Her thing was where is Uncle so and so? No matter if he was the drunk, the alcoholic, or whatsoever, he's a family member. He should be here. So to ostracize somebody from the family is not something that we did. But nowadays, you will find if somebody does not meet a certain standard, that's in family, church, or any environment. If they don't meet a certain standard, nobody's going to be concerned about them. You push them to the side, you forget about them, you really don't love over them anymore. But
Mhm.
when we had stronger family foundations, even that one, somebody went to find them to bring them to that gathering, as to like what Dr. Kimberly was talking about, where we come together, where we come with fellowship together as a family, where we come together, we encourage, where we come together and we love even on that one that we think is the least of us.
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So Dr. Kim, what encouragement would you give somebody right now if they were going through a difficult season when
Ooh.
it comes to their family, or maybe maybe their relationship with their parent or with their children? And it's really difficult, and let's say they're in a position to where they really want to reconnect or make things right, but it's just a difficult season, and they're not really sure how to tackle or have that conversation.
Mm,
Yeah, for a believer, I would say it starts on your knees. It starts in prayer and
mhm,
allowing the Holy Ghost to give you the right strategy, the right timing.
mhm,
Um, a word spoken in season, is better than a word spoken out of season. And I would say, sometimes I say, write it out.
Mm-hmm.
Write out what
Yeah.
to have this relationship improve. What is it you want from the relationship? What is it you want to see? So maybe even you, before you even get to the person, write down the things that are happening that you don't like, and then write down what it is you want to see. And so then when you approach the person, you're coming from a place of knowing like, hey, this is what I would like. How about, then come together and have a conversation on what the other person would like. And then you guys can kind of meet somewhere, because it still goes back to like even the love languages. Like I might do acts of kindness, but you might need touch. And I'm being kind and you need touch. But we both love each other, but we're missing each other. So I
Yeah.
need to understand, how you think and operate, what it is you need from me. And then I need to let you know, hey, this is what I need for you. So I guess at the end of the day, communication is the
Mm-hmm.
key. But before you go in with the conversation, if you've been dealing with some rift, you want to get a strategy first. You want to pray
Yeah.
about it so you'll know how to approach it. You just don't want to pick up the phone like, hey, we ain't been speaking. What's up? We need to, so you're already putting the person on defense with the tone
Mhm.
and tender. Because that was my
Yeah.
old way. Like, yo, what's up? That used to be like bold like that, and it didn't get me anywhere but back by myself again. So the Bible say, let your words be seasoned with grace. So
Right.
so, and that's the final thing I would add to it. It's more, but the final thing I would
Mhm.
add to it is extending grace, one, to yourself, and then grace to the others, whoever it is you're trying to reestablish or reconnect with. I mentioned this, I know, earlier on in the global prayer room on the prayer line, that a lot of times we judge others by their actions, but ourselves by our intentions. So we
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
do, but we're judging them and criticizing them for what they did. But if you really stop and go back and think about it, you probably would have done the same thing, or you have done the same thing. But because they
Mhm.
did it, it's a big darn deal. But I meant, nah, those are your intentions, Mm-mm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so extending
Mhm.
grace, communication, and going in, if you're a believer, going in prayer and asking the Holy Ghost how, the when, the what, and where, and all of that, because all of that adds up. It all plays a part. You don't want to speak before time. You don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to go in with the wrong tender and tone. So yeah.
Yeah. Um, and one of the things that I will say is to war for the relationship. War for your relationship with your parents and your children, or if it's somebody, that the Lord has placed your life, maybe it's a spiritual parent, or whatever the case would be, or a friend or somebody that's close to you. War for those relationships too, because the word of God tells us, the enemy, he does come to kill, steal, and destroy. So there are
Mhm.
some things too that he's trying to destroy and blot out of your life, because he knows that he can try to hinder your purpose, or put you in a position to where you're stagnated from getting to what it is that the Lord has called you to. Because even though some people say it might not affect them, especially when it comes to parents or things of that nature, it's gonna affect, in some type of way at some point. And so you want to war for those relationships too, even in reference to, as Dr. Kimberly was talking about, praying for those relationships. But you really have to stand in a posture too of intercession, asking the Lord, to touch and soften that person's heart towards you, praying before you having that conversation, before you're going there. So that way, not only praying for them, but praying for yourself, because
Mhm.
sometimes we can have certain expectations from a person, and we might have expectations that they're never able to fulfill. And because of that, it will cause us, to go into this to this long road of rejection and all of these other things and unforgiveness and bitterness and strife and envy, all these other things because we had a certain expectation. And so it's best to not have those expectations, but really sit before the Lord and say, how should I posture myself for this relationship, for this conversation? How should I go in? How should I go in whenever I talk to this person, or when is the right time? Because it's all about timing too. It's most definitely about timing too. You want to make sure that you're having the conversations at the right time as well. So before we wrap it up, Dr. Kim, did you have something else you
Yeah,
wanted to say?
you said it because I wanted to come back and add on about prayer and asking God to touch their hearts. And I definitely want to say that to Jacob and his peers, especially when it's dealing with parents and you kind of know how they usually respond or how they usually going to react to whatever, to pray and ask God to turn the heart of stone into a heart of flesh. That the heart of the Lord, I mean, yeah, the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord for him to turn whichsoever way he will. So just being able to pray and ask the Holy Spirit or ask God to touch your parents' heart or whoever it is, your older sibling, younger, whatever, even if it's the parent to the child, but definitely wanted to encourage those youth that are in the Lord that to pray and ask God to prepare the way to make the crooked places straight in the
Yes.
conversation and
Yeah,
in the relationship. So yeah,
Yeah.
right.
thanks for letting me come
Abs-
back and add that. But you hit it, so I was like, good, because I wanted to come back and say that.
Yeah,
But I definitely wanted to address the youth, like when you have to deal with
right.
adult, your teachers,
Yeah,
your principals, your professors. That the power of prayer. There's
yeah,
power
yeah.
in prayer.
And so before I let
Mm.
Dr. Robin chime in, what, one of the last things that I want to say is that, and I had to learn this as a parent, but be patient with your children because they're having to deal with a lot of relationships that they didn't choose. They didn't choose
Mhm.
their parents, they didn't choose their siblings, they're not choosing their teachers, right? They're not choosing, the ministries we go to. They're like we're choosing all these things. Like they're not choosing their football coaches and it. But when you look at it from a child's perspective, they have a lot of relationships they have to try to deal with on a daily basis, where us as adults, we can remove ourselves from certain relationships. If we don't like our boss, hey, we find a new job. If we don't like the place, that we're going to, hey, do we people find a new job? You know what I'm saying? Like we can remove ourselves from certain things. Now that might not mean you should always do that, but I'm just saying that we have those options where as children, they don't have those options, right?
Mhm.
If we don't like a certain college, we'll go to a different one, whatever the case may be. And so they have a lot of different relationships that they're having to manage on a daily and weekly basis, and they don't
Mhm.
even get to decide who they're having those relationships with. So, Dr. Robin, do you have any last questions? I mean, do you have any last feedback? I'm sorry, before we wrap up.
I think I would just add to what you've already said about the ones going through difficult seasons is that just to encourage them that that season is not a season of hopelessness, to encourage them to continue to fight, because and don't be ashamed to ask questions, don't be ashamed to ask for help. um and I know it's hard to, but try your best not to get to a places to where you just don't communicate,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that coming into the, it's like, a lot of times people say that thing is, oh, God's put me in a quiet place right now. We have to be careful when we say that we're going into that quiet place, how God's speaking to us now. That
yeah,
comes back to where I was saying with the teaching of the of what I feel that we're missing in our spiritual walk, of how to really deal with these emotions in the trauma that we go through, and identifying how we need to act or how we need to deal with those things. People have to need to be trained about these emotions and these lockdowns that we put ourselves into, and call ourselves allowing ourselves to be healed by this
Yeah.
so-called isolation. um so it's just like that. And a lot of times too, another thing that has shut people down in this time when they go through these difficult seasons is what I call a ball and chain of shame. Because shame will have you to, because you're ashamed of the certain, things you're going through. You're ashamed of, and you feel like nobody's going through this but you. So it's just like come out of that shame and don't be and let yourself loose from it and communicate.
That's good. That's good. So, that's all we're going to talk about or discuss on tonight. But I do want to throw this out there that I do have the ministry to sister collaboration, but the Lord has been working with me for a while on actually the Renovation House ministry came before the sister collaboration, and that's a ministry that He has imparted in me to really help family establish a foundation when it comes to trauma, mental health, and emotional intelligence. And one of the other ones I added in there, actually, when I was speaking to my husband about it, he said temperance, which I think was really good too. They're very important. So you guys can go out, join us on Facebook. We actually going to get ready to do a launch here pretty soon, to where we're actually not only just be out in the community, but where we'll begin to start working with families one on one and in group sessions as far as helping them with coaching. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up here. Do you guys have any last input before we jump off of here?
I have a question. I wanted to ask Jacob, just being a youth, what do you need from us as adults, or what do you need from your parent to help you be emotionally stable, or mentally stable? Like, what do you need from us, your teachers?
Um, I would say always having that support on that if everything is if you're having a hard time and you can come a person that you can count on and depend on to help you out even in your toughest times and even in your best times.
Mm.
You're saying that don't have the I don't want to have a teacher that not only just get me on the things I fail on, but also the things that I will pass on. Also having a parent that doesn't just talk about the negative thing about me, but also the positive
Come
thing about
on.
me.
Mm-hmm.
And also having other people around me. Like I have a group of friends that, we joke around and everything. But when it comes to serious matter, I know I can trust on them and I know they can trust in me
Mm-hmm.
to get stuff done.
Yeah, and that's good. And I'm
That's
gonna chime in because as your children get older, parents allow them to establish those relationships with their friends. We have friends, right? There will be times where they will talk to us about stuff, and there'll be times where they might want to talk to somebody around their age about those things, and allow them to have those relationships and take more time out. Because see, this is my oldest, and so I had to learn to take more time out where sometimes it's just me and him. Because you have smaller kids, they can take up a lot of your time, right? They can take up a lot of your time because they're much younger. And so have that space too where you can set aside time with your children one on one, and hear them out too, when they're talking about things, hear them out.
Yeah.
Hear 'em out. And when I say hear them out, like hear them out to the point where there's no there's no boundaries with it. Like there's nothing off the table. You get what I'm saying? Like those straightforward conversations, but allow them to build those relationships too with their friends. Yeah.
It's just like even in his generation desires that village.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. We live in a time now where the village is weakened. I mean,
Mhm.
I even noticed that when he was little, I had a lot of good people around me, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, the village was not as, it's not as strong and not as
Mhm.
trustworthy as it used to be,
Used to
you
be.
know,
Yeah.
as it used to be. And I was really, within this last year, I was really excited. And that's another thing to parents, and vet these things. But I was really excited about um, his coach this year, the football program. It was a village for us, like seriously.
Mhm.
Like they, some really good coaches, some really good people, who helped us through the process, and he signed, like they helped us through that process. So that was
Yes.
a really good village, and he connected really closely with them, which that made me feel good because when it's time for them to go away to college, like he has some relationships that are already established outside of his family, which that's what we want for our children. We want them to be able to establish their own community too. So yeah,
Mhm. Exactly.
yeah. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. If you guys want to go back and watch the replay, you can find us on YouTube just as well as Facebook. We do also have the third annual Sisterhood Collaboration Retreat that's coming up July the 23rd to the 26th. I think there's probably like two or maybe three spots that's available, but I am going to do the cutoff at May the 30th. So if you are interested, this will be the time to jump on. And that's pretty much all that I have tonight. So I thank everybody for coming on and watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful